Shady Sands, which also led to her mother becoming a ghoul. However, he presented his motivations for the brain control interface in the form of All Quiet on the Western Front. He wants everyone to just stop fighting, hit the thumbs up, be docile and agreeable. Right now, the wasteland isn't safe, but if everyone has this device, there will potentially be peace. Yes, mate, but who controls them? Well, that's what we're gonna get into, and that takes us into the episode itself. Now we begin with a flashback of Steph escaping from the Uranian city and Tim and camp out in the woods. As we know, Canadians were persecuted heavily and the country was annexed during the Sino-American War. Seen as somewhere that was filled with valuable resources, it was taken over by the US of A in a decade-long move that started in 2067. The opening of Fallout 1 actually featured a soldier in power armor executing a Canadian citizen, which showed how bleak the situation was. This is something that we also see in the credits, and I'll kind of break those down as we get towards the end. It was in power armor executing a Canadian citizen, which showed how bleak the situation was. This is something that we also see in the credits, and I'll kind of break those down as we get towards the end of the breakdown. In this intro, she's held up by the Brotherhood of Steel member, but saved by a man who detonates an explosive. This reminds me of the super mutant suiciders, who are a very annoying enemy type from the games. Awakened in the present though, I love how Chet has an eye mask while she just raw dogs it on the pillow even with her wound. Just highlights how grim and comfortable his life is, whereas she's really had to go through it. Throughout the episode, we see her at several stages in her life, including post-war. This also leads to her wedding as well, in which she too has to run just like this opening. This is all about her being persecuted, but the second time it's kind of through her own actions, which were kind of caused by what happened here and made her into the person that she is. Does that make sense? Brings things very full circle from the introduction though, but she was persecuted for things out of her control. Remembering her ally dying due to the family likeness, I'm guessing that this might be her sister. Her mother? Whoa, no way, you're young enough to be her sister. Anyway, she died in the aftermath of the blast, and this is something that Steph carries heavily. She instructed Steph to survive at all costs, and this is clearly he's got into the battle twice, and Steph's just told her think of them as Americans instead of being never do that, mate. My subscribers from the good old US of A. Yeehaw! Going to the bathroom, we can see there's some Albaline baby powder. Manufactured in the 60s, I'll stop this in the touch world, and even how the toothbrush gown is Voltec blue. Games only like Abrax so which is a great touch. Now in the past, she continues further into the woods, and we also see her snatching some pork and beans which look just like the ones in the game. She then enters the US, and we can see the flag which represents the 13 states of the Commonwealth. The government actually did this to consolidate power and basically merge the states so they had more control over the country as a whole. I love the logo as blood fills it up, and this striking red is of course the colour of the Canadian flag. After the title, we then cut back to Hank's vault, where we can hear When You're Smiling by Nat King Cole. This is a song about how joy can spread and the whole world could smile in unison, which we can see with the brain control workers. They're all getting along, hitting the thumbs up, subscribing, and happily working at their desks to do something progressive. Yay capitalism! Lucy does see this as a way to save the world, but she also says that it's wrong. Hank then explains how it works, and basically it makes them very placid by cleaning their horrible memories. I kind of view it as like a sort of opposite of the rage virus in 28 Days Later, and whereas that ramps you up into a very aggressive state, this just fully calms you down. Controlling how much amnesia they have controls the level of how docile they are, and basically just removes their feelings of mental pain. It's an extra thing that we'll of course talk about later, but this is what sold us on the surface. But this scene reminds me of Thaddeus saying that he'd probably be a good person like Lucy if he didn't have to survive upon the surface. Hank has removed the trauma from these people's minds, and we do see that he's kinda right. Also love how Hank's still wearing the handcuffs, showing that Lucy still doesn't trust him. Killed me as well how Lucy has to ask her dad how to destroy it. As always, he's just really helpful and even takes her for driving lessons. There's not really any usable cars in the wasteland, and the games didn't exactly have driving lessons. Plus the vaults didn't have much room for vehicles, so this gives a nice father and daughter moment that also sets up the car ride later. Just works really well as a bonding moment though, and when Lucy turns on his dad, we get a mirror scene because of it. Oop, and I've just remembered there was actually a highwayman vehicle you could use to travel across the world map, so there were vehicles, but moving on. Now to Bedelia by Billy Randolph in the High Hatters, they then go to the basement. A line that really sticks out is how Hank says he wishes they had a normal life. However, his ambition forced him to wreck things. Though the vault said of the purposes, they could have potentially stayed there and lived very happy lives. Don't know why, that's all that welcome to Derry stuff, constantly saying that throughout that, but yeah, he's kind of like the dad who has an affair or goes off to get milk and never comes back, and he did things for himself at the expense of his kids. To him though, things just aren't black and white, and I'm sure he could justify it as him having to help the surface. Lucy questions this as she goes to the vault, and we see the Roman army guy who attacked her is now mopping the floor. The mainframe door and sign as well are just like the high security ones that we see in the game. Lucy then says how the Legion are still out there and her dad could stop them from hurting a lot of people. She's seen firsthand what they're like, but is it ethical? Ooh, you'll have to tell me in the comments. We then cut to the NCR base and catch up with the ghoul and the gang. Maximus then references the last fight they had that went down in Philly during Season 1. Thaddeus also mentions how he's found using the power armors very hard, and even picking up a cup becomes almost an impossible task. There is new power armor introduced in the episode though, but we will break that down later. Thaddeus then tries to find some common ground, and it's kind of like the ghoul, the bad and the ugly. The ghoul then lays out a long and convoluted plan which involves a lot of side quests and picking up some upgrades. Okay, so we just recently had the holidays and also New Year, where people tend to spend. Getting your finances in order for 2026 is probably going to be difficult as it's so hard to keep track of everything. If you're like me, you probably have lots of different subscription services like streaming sites, your gym membership and whatever else on top of it. Chances are you've probably forgotten some stuff you're paying for as well, and even when you're trying to cancel it, it's like trying to pull teeth. That's where our sponsors Rocket Money come in. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It also monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It can cut your spending in half, and it allows you to cancel in most cases directly from the app with just a few taps. So you avoid charges and save time either going through websites or having to sit on the phone for ages and ages and ages. And I know you hate that, because I do as well. I will sometimes even pay for stuff just to not sit on the phone. Beyond that, there's also automatic transaction categorization across accounts. You can group things together and tag certain transactions to reveal spending patterns or add context to what some charges are. You can also set budgets and goals, as well as setting personalized insights and reports. Rocket Money will also send real-time alerts for large transactions when there's an upcoming bill, a refund or a low balance. The app also consolidates checking, savings, loans and investments into a single dashboard to give users a clear view of their financial picture. Rocket Money is just a massive money and time saver that will help you reach your financial goals faster. Join today at rocketmoney.com/spoilers. That's rocketmoney.com/spoilers, rocketmoney.com/spoilers. Thanks. And at this point, Maximus gets out the cold fusion and Cooper starts to question how he got it. At gunpoint, which is nice. Thaddeus hilariously tries to talk the situation down, and I love the way it's a tense standoff and he's there just cracking jokes. But to Cooper, this is obviously the thing that broke the world and took his family from him. He basically did a Faustian deal to save the planet and was a puppet in between the parties that was constantly manipulated and used. Now it's all coming down to a handoff, which of course ties in the title. This also comes back around because of the other handoff, and it's so well handled oft. Either way, Maximus says it's for Lucy, and we then see the first handoff in the episode with Coop tipping Steph. Working minimum wage at the Lucky 38, I love the costume design here. Her clothes are wide, and it nicely foreshadows the wedding dress we see later on. Earlier in the season, there was also a theory that it was Steph who kissed Coop on the casino floor, and we even had it in the breakdown script originally. However, we then checked the credits and it was a different actress, but I did see a lot of comments asking why we hadn't pointed it out. But yeah, in a way, you guys were alright, and she does work here, and I think is very clearly ambitious about getting in a vault. Coop says, though, that if people do the right thing, they can avoid them altogether, but obviously she's had to murder and steal to get where she is. She knows the world isn't like that, and evil will likely always prevail. Told to escort Hank to his room, it also clears up how she got a place in the vault. Considering that she also knew about Hank's keepsake box and what was in it, I do wonder how that's going to come into play in the finale. But yeah, I'm guessing that she dropped him back in his room and then stayed there to get herself a job, which is hustle culture. We then cut to the bar, which is the same one that Coop visited on the strip as a ghoul. It's so good seeing this scene in the past, and I love the different actions the character takes. Initially he went there and drank because of what he had to do, which was handing over Lucy, which he of course knew was bad. Now though, he's trying to stay sober and do the right thing. There's also an animal head on the bar, which is different to the mutated creature that was there in the future. He's also keeping a low profile with a hat very reminiscent of Piper from the game. Meeting with Diane Welsh, she then says she's a good person trying to do the right thing. Obviously, she's a reflection of Lucy, and it sets up why he questions things with Lucy later down the line. Lucy has her own meeting with her later, which shows what could happen if she carries on this path of altruism, and Diane actually becomes a really important character. He asks why politicians can't sell the good ideals better, and references how inept she was at the VA ceremony. As we've seen with our world though, fear and mistrust is a far more powerful message. Like Moldava, she wants to give free energy to everyone, and even mentions how they can end the resource wars tonight. At this point in the timeline, it's been 25 years, and yeah, I just loved seeing firsthand how bad Steph had it, and then that they could end this war tonight. Now the deal with the devil comes in when she says she can give it to someone who's better suited to look after it than her. That is, to the president who's landed at McCarran Airport. In the game, this is the airport that serves Las Vegas, but post-war, it's actually an NCR base. The airport's also a good way to sneak into the strip without having to pass a well check at the main strip gate. If you're friendly with the NCR, you can also use the monorail to reach the strip itself. You even had the NCR president arriving in New Vegas, albeit landing at the Hoover Dam, where you could take him out if you wanted. Anyway, we're kind of burying the lead here, but the president's played by none other than Clancy Brown, which is a massive throwback to the games. In them, Clancy actually voiced Rhombus, who was a member of the Brotherhood of Steel. The credits just list him as the president, and though we never found out what the final pre-war US president's name was, we did learn in Fallout 76 that it started with the Eye. There was a huge conspiracy as the president and most of the cabinet were missing 6 months before the bombs fell, and the reporter Max Vicchio learned that he was on the Poseidon oil rig. Now the president that we meet in Fallout 2 is actually named Dick Richardson, and the DI might be a reference to that. In the series, he was the main bad guy in Fallout 2 and was the leader of the Enclave, but the timelines are off for him to be that character. But yeah, if this isn't Dick Richardson, I do feel like the president here is more than likely a member of the Enclave. With that reveal as well, you can totally see why in the future Cooper just has this very cynical view of people saying they're going to do the right thing. At the moment though, he's very naive, and thus he hands the Cold Fusion over. Now you might remember that Cold Fusion was almost discovered by Lee Moldava, but Vault-Tec bought every company she worked for and turned it into a proprietary technology. There it was going to be used in the Garden of Eden devices that would terraform the wasteland. At some point though, the Enclave managed to get a hold of it, which we saw in Season 1. Siggy then turned on the organization, which led to him losing his head trying to get it to Moldava 200 years later. Now I'm somewhat of a scientist myself, and the way Cold Fusion works would vastly alter the power dynamics. Simply put, nuclear fusion needs extreme heat to force the nuclei close together into colliding. This is opposed to fission, which splits uranium into energy. Fusion does not create any byproducts other than helium, while fission at the moment provides nuclear waste. So vastly different, and it causes the most energy waste. Great! So why aren't we using it, you might ask? Well, more energy is needed to create the fusion that is produced. So as Cold Fusion is achieved, energy efficient and essentially lift this cheap energy. The franchise was created amid the backdrop of the resource wars, so there was no way that Vault-Tec would allow their rivals and enemies to achieve it. This then provided a world of limited energies, and the scarce energy created the perfect environment for them to basically make loads of cash. In the game, House also needed it to power his stasis pod, and this would allow him to stay alive indefinitely so he could protect Las Vegas to the end of time. Now, as we saw last week, the Enclave are the big bad at the show that's been working in the background. They completely caused all this shit in the first season and manipulated a lot of the events, including Bob saying they should
just
drop
chill
bombs.
out,
They're
asshole.
also the other player that House didn't know existed. And although they're a shadowy organization, we did learn more about them in Fallout 2 and discovered there that they wanted to wipe out everyone in the Wasteland. In that they aimed to modify the FEV to kill anyone who had the slightest bit of radiation exposure. So yeah, pretty much everyone on the surface. Now I kind of see it as being akin to Hank, who wants to control the population and rule the Wasteland. The Enclave want to take things to the extreme though and rule the Wasteland by killing the population. Now before the war, the Enclave were essentially the deep state boogeymen that we hear about the real world. They're basically what was left of the government after the bombs fell, and were an insidious group within it that wanted to rule the world after wiping the slate clean. In the past, they covered up the existence of aliens and then started to draw contingencies for a nuclear war with China. Now, as for locations they've been based at, inside Noel Reagan White Ring's congressional bunker, looking for the government to live out the end of days. They also places such as Raven Rock that we saw in Fallout 3. Coming back to the last episode, the reason that Siggy was at Vault-Tec HQ is that the Enclave were involved with the vaults. They wanted to use them for experiments with a view of heading into space. This would be on a multi-generational starship which would lead the descendants to colonize another planet, mainly because Earth would be completely uninhabitable. Thus, they needed the vaults to basically run experiments and see if it was possible for someone to survive in a container like this while we made our journey across the stars. Now in the lore, the Appalachian Enclave were cut off, which led to a bloody Enclave civil war. One faction wanted to attack China and unleash the horrors of the wasteland to trick the automated missiles into thinking it was DEFCON 1. In the end, this just left an AI named Modus, who he did look rather similar to Siggy. There has even been a few times that this could be a copy of his conscience, and that would be quite a big twist. Don't know how it would work, mate, but it would be a big twist. Now, after the West Coast Enclave's plans were ruined by the destruction of their oil rig, the survivors headed to the capital Wasteland. They seemingly brought hope to the Wasteland and presented the idea that they were going to use a giant purifier to make water safe in Washington, D.C. Once again, it was all a ruse though, and they wanted to use the FEV to get rid of abominations. They were then either defeated or succeeded depending on the actions of the player, and there were some tired remnants in New Vegas which are clearly still operating out yet. So we end with him handing it over to the US government. He has no clue that the bloke who blackmailed Bob is part of a secret organization inside them though, so he's just handed over the people that he technically stole it from. At some point he's also going to be outed as a pinko and get divorced from his wife, and I'm guessing this lays the groundwork for that. Jumping back to the present, we then see them arming up and grabbing lots of weapons. Maximus picks up what looks like a grenade APW, while Thaddeus has a hunting or battle rifle from New Vegas. Here Thaddeus also tries to do some more ghoul-on-ghoul talk and reveals the mouth on his neck. Super mutant, mate, I'm telling you, super mutant. The games have a wide variety of mutations though, and there was even a dude who had a tree that grew out of him. He then asks for a scope, which is a mod you can get in New Vegas. Maximus at this point is also a kind of young and idealistic reflection of Cooper, who thinks everything will work out if he hands it to someone good. However, Cooper's done this all before and realizes that he has to give it to Mr. House in order for it to actually do some good. So they need to rig the game. I think this kind of also reflects Maximus's mind state, as though he said the armor leads to no good in the desert, it's something that he ends up donning. Because yeah, you always end up back where you started. The armor is also attached to a power armor station, which you use in Fallout 4 and 76. The NCR power armor is actually something you can wear in the game, however it looks incredibly different to what we see Maximus wearing. This might be because Maximus is using the NCR Ranger power armor instead. The armor in the show is the T60, while the NCR one in the game is the T51B and T45. In Fallout New Vegas, the NCR managed to salvage from their war with the Brotherhood of Steel, and the servos were removed, so you didn't need any training before wearing them. However, as we heard from Harkness, the Commonwealth has motion-assisted servos now. There's also a difference in the HUD from the other power armors that we've seen so far. The HUD here is red as opposed to its usual orange, which, yeah, is basically showing a slight difference. Joining Norm waking up on the floor, we see Buds discussing his fate. The handbook says death mate, and he gets smashed like the like button. It's here that we then return to Vault 32 and see the wedding celebrations are mounting up. We can hear the song I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, which is a classic by Vera Lynn. It's also the anthem of West Ham United. One day you're the European champions, the next day you're in a relegation battle. But yeah, it's a very upbeat and happy song on the surface, but when you get into the lyrics, it's actually quite depressing. The song is about how dreams and hopes all fade away and burst like bubbles in the air. Taken at face value, Chet's dreams are screwed and he's stuck living his life with a monster. Take my wife for example. He's not even got an idea of why anything's happening, but he's just so excited for the wedding. On the notice board we also have several signs, including a shooting range pamphlet. They're using 50 caliber rounds now, and you can also bring your kids, yay! The graphic there is also the one from the sniper perk in the game, and we have the ninja one to the right. Davey is also currently searching for his copy of Dean Electronics. In the games, this is a skill book that can permanently increase your repair skills. You also have a sign for Pipe Curious, and both Lucy and Steph did this during their time in the vault. The loving couple have a very tense moment in their home though, and this is when Chet makes a terrifying discovery. The sink is blocked, and he then fishes some glasses out the plug hole. However, dun dun dun, these are the ones that Woody wore. We last saw Woody when he reported Steph's illegal vault door opening to the Overseer, who also just happened to be Steph. Considering that Steph's up to no good and has a whole secret agenda, having Woody sniffing around is not something she needed, and Steph is basically marking her own homework. Last episode we even learned that he was missing, as Davey had been looking for him, and that was a pretty big clue that he'd come to an unsightly end. Chet already knew that Steph was from Vault 31, and this combined with her secret Canadian history means my guy should start panicking, because we all bloody hate Canadians at this channel. Steph then says that Woody's been sent on a leadership exchange program, but we all know that his outies probably just up on the surface. Nah, the guy's as dead as this channel once the Fallout videos end. Back to making 400 Doctor Doom videos a week. I don't even think Chet thinks he's coming back though, due to the way he destroys his spectacles. Him being part of the leadership exchange program though is the same cover story that Betty used when Reg asked where Norm was in episode 1.
Norm has been sent for a leadership exchange program to Vault 31.
I love how we then jump from a block sink with an abundance of water to the grim fate of Vault 33. The water rationing's now in full effect, and showers and even flushing the toilet is banned. Flush that Screen Crush video right down with it. Screen flush. Betty then decides to hand over the... I love Ryan and Cole. I'm only kidding. Betty then decides to hand over the box to Steph and meet once more at the junction. As we saw, the box was in a safe behind a picture, and this was actually a painting from Fallout 4. It's a recreation of Napoleon crossing the Alps. However, if you look closely, you can see Todd Howard's face, who's the executive producer of Bethesda. Very, very good Easter egg, and it's in a keepsake box, just like the one that Bob was filling earlier in the season. We then get a far more tense standoff than last time, and Betty goes to Steph saying she just wants peace. However, Steph is from a world where the violent and manipulative survive, and I just don't think the twee people in the vault are cut out for her. Jumping to Freeside, this is a play on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. We've mentioned that many times, but goddamn, I'm thorough and you might not have seen all the breakdowns. We can also see the Atomic Wrangler in the background and someone selling Sunset Sarsaparilla. There's also posters for Maxis the Magician and Joey Baxter, both of whom were going to play at the Sierra Madre Casino. All of the people here are also exiles from New Vegas, such as Showgirls and Bellhops. The Ghoul and the gang then roll into town with the population believing it's the NCR coming back. I even wonder if the previous owner only made it a week, as we have tally marks that only go up to 5 on his helmet. They did a lot of stuff like this in Vietnam, and it was of course immortalized in Full Metal Jacket, and then also inspired stuff in Aliens. Sound like an idiot saying that because it's been done on a hell of a lot of stuff, but yeah, obviously, you know, it's inspired by real world things. Someone then says, get us back our town, and as we mentioned earlier, Maximus has come full circle to his NCR origins. Maximus also sees a little kid on the strip who looks up to him like he's a hero, and this is of course a callback to when he was younger and did the same thing when looking at Power Armor. As they walk the strip entrance, we can also see a Ralph's sign. This is a reference to one of the stores in the games, which is called Mick and Ralph's. Thaddeus' arm then falls off, and yeah, I'm predicting by the finale he'll be a fallen super mutant. I think this will then likely tie in with what the Ghoul learned about, and I think it'll lead into something massive. Now, we learned that the Ron Perlman super mutant wanted the Ghoul to join in a war against the Enclave. They've been hunted to near extinction, which explains why we haven't seen them so far in Season 1 or 2. Well, apart from the one we saw at the Enclave's HQ in Season 1, but other than that, we haven't really seen them. But yeah, I suspect that the super mutants want to stop the Enclave. However, it does have to be stated that usually in the game they're enemies, but the way that it's handled with Perlman, I do think that, yeah, they are going to be the good guys. And apologies for all the super mutants that I've killed across the franchise, Ron. I didn't mean it. You're a nice guy after all. Now, the Enclave actually had a super mutant as part of their secret service who was named Frank Horrigan. He was experimented on and made into the largest and strongest super mutant imaginable.
Let's take a look.
This was so they could deploy him on missions to benefit the group. However, he died in Fallout 2. And there was also the Master, who was a human who fell into the FEV vats at Mariposa military base. He mutated into a beastly monster and then began trying to turn everyone in the world into super mutants. Kinda like the Lizard in Amazing Spider-Man. But yeah, you know, that was via his church called Unity, and he used lots of vault dwellers due to their lack of radiation exposure. So if Ron Perlman is indeed a remnant of the Master's experiments, then his war could be a war of ideologies. Either way, it's at this point that we then cut to Lucy, who's now in a yellow dress. This is a similar style to the pre-war dresses you could find in the game. Now, if you want to look your best like Lucy, then why not check out our merch store right below the video. There we've got a whole host of shirts inspired by Fallout and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. There we have our Deathclaw, Ghoul and Brotherhood ones, which are some of the best designs we have on there. We also have those ones for Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and massive discounts where the more you buy, the more money that you get off. Shabow! Lucy then makes her way down in the basement, and then judging by the trailers, will arrive on the surface near Top's Casino. I don't normally do trailer spoilers, but that was shown in the first one from like 5 months ago, so if you haven't seen it, mate, it's your fault, and I'm guessing it's made the rounds. Top's Casino comes from the game and is one of the 3 casinos that operates on the strip. Now, Lucy breaking free while wearing this has a lot of symbology, or symbolism, whatever the word is. The way the dress is presented to her is a lot like how the wedding dress was presented in episode 1 of season 1. During that big long intro, we saw Hank's illusion being shattered and then her making her way to the surface, which is basically what happens with Lucy here. There he constructed this fake reality and even nuked Shady Sands to keep her safe. Now she's escaping another fake reality and wearing a dress picked for her again. The room that she woke up in was observation, and Hank was in one named simulation, so once again she's escaped a literal simulation. She's not letting the wasteland change her and is again rejecting the easy option of just sticking with her father. Fallout has always had the theme of breaking free from one's fate and making a choice. Whether it be the multiple dialogue trees, karma, or hell, even breaking free from the vault in the opening of some of the games, it all kind of thematically builds off what the games have given us. Heading to Global Comms, she then walks past the radio that Hank used in episode 1 before going for dinner with him. They're eating mashed potatoes, and I do wonder if it's the Insta-Mash from the game. It's all done up to look just like home, but she's clearly torn when she sees Uncle Rico having to serve them. His agency's gone, and his memories are as well. Everything that made him him has been wiped clean. Without our memories, we don't have any identity, and she's rebuilt her own life at the cost of someone else's. He's lost 25 years and is now just living a life of servitude. To me, it also ties in the saying of how you can either reign in hell or serve in heaven. Sure, the surface was hell, but there you at least had free will. In the vaults, it's safety and security, but it all comes with a cost. Every time the vault's been shown to us, we've always been looking up at the towering staircase in the middle. So it seems like it's ascending up into the sky, just like how heaven's often depicted. However, in reality, it's below the surface and more like hell when it comes to that level. It's incredibly bleak as well, as Biff's basically a slave to the man who nuked the NCR capital. The ghoul also said this in episode 1.
Think they'd be nice to you, they'd find out what your daddy did?
Something we mentioned when we saw that Hank had captured him. Hank's ruined his life by cutting Mojave NCR from supplies, and now he's made Biff into a human robot. But he is being nice, to be fair. Lucy then handcuffs her dad at the oven, and we see the truth in his willingness to help her when he can't be there to manipulate her. We also see her ghoul finger once again as she unlocks one of the cups. Hank then patronizes her and says the NCR are just like the Legion. They have high taxes, expansionist policies, so on and so on. We do know what the character's really like though, as Shady Sands was a bastion of freedom and a jewel in the wasteland. However, it wasn't something controlled by Hank, so in his eyes it had to go. The Legion are also objectively evil, while the NCR are clearly the best faction out there, or was. On the surface, Norm's then freed and he goes to the radio to try and contact his sister before then trying his father. Norm has no idea his dad's a psycho who nuked the free city of Shady Sands, and he's still in the delusion that Hank's a good guy, kind of like Lucy was in season 1. He's using a radio just like Hank in episode 1, and then Hank contacted someone who he presumed was Mr. Leeson. This moment builds off the back of episode 5, where Bud's trying to get the radio working at Vault-Tec HQ. Cheers, lads. He has seen the FEV file though, and is worried that whatever he thinks it is going to harm his vault. In case you don't know what the FEV is, that was created by West-Tec pre-war. It was originally called the Pan-Immunity Virion, which was a cure for the new plague. After researching the cure, the FEV then created a spin-off, as it was found that it gave radiation immunity and growth and evolutionary effects. West-Tec then ended up contaminating the water supply of Huntersville in Appalachia, which mutated the population. Yay! The virus can be transmitted by an infected person, and post-war, the Master actually dipped people in giant vats of the green liquid. It's a very hit-and-miss process, with there being different strains of the FEV. See, some can turn out intelligent, while others can end up being hulking beasts. Some can be strong and tough in a kind of best of both worlds situation, while others can be absolute idiots who all watch Screen Crush. Now, the FEV did create the super mutants that we see in the games and show. However, things always mess up, and because of this, the best subjects for this kind of experiment are in fact the Vault Dwellers. This is because you need to use a subject who has had no exposure to radiation or any previous FEV strains. I don't think it's any coincidence that Bud wanted to create a race of super managers, while Vault-Tec also had the FEV data on their database. And slowly, things are falling into place. Either way, the call is interrupted by the arrival of Buds once more, and we cut back to the wedding proceedings. The wedding dress itself definitely looks like it's inspired by Kill Bill, and even has a lovely white eye patch, which is a very nice touch. The dress is different to Lucy's as well, but I do wonder if it was also handed down through the vault like the other. Davey is officiating the event, but he isn't wearing the robes that we saw in season 1. We can also see how much better this vault is doing compared to the other, as their crops are very healthy. Chet then says, I don't, and with the witnesses all around, he reveals steps up to no good. He then tells the truth about the glasses, but stupidly destroyed the evidence. Well done, mate. Bloody cold feet you have. But then he reveals the ID, and oh god, she's a Canadian. Now in the season 1 wedding, Lucy was on the right side, just like Chet is here. Both Lucy's husband and Steph were not who they say they were, so it's a very nice touch that these scenes are similarly laid out. She then runs off, and I really wonder where she's going to go, but we get a mirror scene where she makes a desperate dash to the control room, mirroring her fleeing from the camps. I love the way she then sits down in front of the Stars and Stripes, and obviously she hates Americans. She could even potentially kill them from this control room by starving them to death or something, and it's just a nice touch having it in the background. On the surface, we then see Maximus take on the Deathclaw, which leads to such a cool fight. The Deathclaw is such a bloody Deathclaw that you can even see it's been eating another Deathclaw. Just like the fighting Coop with Philly, Maximus gets stuck again, this time on a car. I also like how the armor says 07, and this is episode 7. Cooper then makes it to the door, but the creature starts coming for him. And yet, we've all felt like how he looks when one's facing you down. Luckily though, Maximus beheads it, and thus Coop can head inside.
I'll take a look.
More arrive, and they smash him through the gates, meaning that they can now attack the population. I'm guessing the finale will be Maximus standing off against them before eventually being rescued by Thaddeus, who is going to be a super mutant. I'm telling you, he's going to be a super mutant. Meanwhile with Coop, we see as he presses a button and the Lucky 38 gate opens just like the game. We then get the handoff at both the past and present. A pre-war Freeside, we can see Coop's movie under the covers, which fits this clandestine meeting. There's also the Lucky 38 advert from the games, as well as Showgirls. The President car also looks like a Highwayman car that we mentioned earlier, or it might be the sedan made by the same company. His tie is also really interesting, as it's red, white and black. The Enclave have black flags as well as their E on their Commonwealth flag, so this might be a clue that he is indeed the Enclave. Bob is definitely into the whole president thing though, but completely unaware that they're the people who threatened her. At least that's how I took it, but yeah, let me know what you think. The couple still need to break up though, and we end with past Coop handing over the cold fusion and Lucy discovering Diane's head in the mainframe. I'm guessing because of her pacifist, peace-loving ways that she's the perfect brain that will keep people docile, but it's just using someone kind to control the rest of the world. Much like what Lucy could potentially be manipulated into doing as well. The mainframe also looks a bit different than the ones that we've seen in the game, and she's wearing the same helmet that we saw Mr. House wear in the past, so potentially they might have co-opted his machines or maybe even had some involvement. Anyway, this allowed him to connect to his mainframe. The plan there was to use cold fusion for limitless energy to protect New Vegas and supercharge his predictive algorithms. President Coop then turns things on in the Lucky 38. Beside the machine, we can see disabled Securitron, and in the game, you can fight the ones in Mr. House's penthouse, depending on if you want to kill them or not, but I'm guessing the courier did if that is the case, yeah. On the desk, you can also see a Hoover Dam snow globe, which were collectibles in the game. They're basically the New Vegas version of Fallout 3's bobblehead. Now we then see Mr. House's avatar popping up on the monitor, just like we saw in the games. In case you don't know, House was basically kept alive until New Vegas, and this was through a stasis pod that had his brain connected to a computer. I think the real tragedy with Mr. House is that he needs to control everything, and this has turned his ambition into a prison. Driven by his own intellect, he built this machine House's body, which might even play on his name, like House his body, beyond the House always wins thing. But yeah, that has pushed him to live long past his years into having a miserable existence in the pod. There's a kind of contradiction in House, as he cares greatly about humanity as a whole, but just sees the individual human as purely being a resource. His arrogance and inability to really fully trust others to control things has led to him living forever in this prison where he has to rely on others to get things done. Courier ultimately decided things for him in New Vegas, and it made him as helpless as the people that he used for his own ends in the past. His fate was kind of left up in the air in the game though, and you didn't really know what happened to him. However, with his reveal, he's clearly survived depending on whatever ending was chosen. Unfortunately though, he's been completely out of action as the strip's been overrun by Deathclaws. We then cut to the credits and see the Canadian sign has been changed to Little America, with the flag and border being completely wrecked. Rangers have been hanged, and we pull out to see the Big 51 sign. Now, along with Little America, this was another name used to refer to the country as. The place is a complete wasteland, and it's a great way to show us the state of the country, and I kind of feel bad for them, mate, and maybe I do love Canada after all. Now going forward, we of course only have one episode left, and due to how Amazon's been acting with the screeners, I do think it's a big one. They didn't send this episode out or episode 8 early and are keeping things very close to the chest, but I have lots of theory time is on my side. Yes, it is. So, I think if we look at Nolan's writing as a whole, then it becomes very obvious that he likes doing cyclical things based around the idea of reflection. There's always some payoff that reflects how things happened earlier, and like even if you watch the end of Westworld, though it got cancelled before its final season, even that works perfectly as a loop. So yeah, I think if we look at the season 1 finale, then using how Nolan writes, we have an okay idea of how this things could go. So because of that, I feel like Cooper reuniting with his daughter is something that will act as a mirror of the last season's final 2 episodes. There Lucy saw her father again and then learned about his atrocities. Here Cooper's defied the odds to return to his daughter. However, I think seeing he's a ghoul and well basically a monster, I think will be similar to the reveal with Hank. Throughout the episodes, we've had lots of focus on the fix as well, and I do feel like the uranium used to heal him might also end up being his downfall. In the games, not only can the ghouls turn feral, but they can also become what's known as a glowing one. These are ghouls that have consumed so much radiation that they turn into walking atomic reactors. So it's going to be very bittersweet if that happens, just as he gets his family back. I feel like just as he sees them, he's going to get one last look and then possibly turn into a feral ghoul and then maybe even into a glowing one. This will leave him reduced to a monster and close out his tragic story. Kind of like the end of No Time to Die, if you've seen it. It's kind of a lethal thing happens and he's like, oh well, I would rather, at least I've seen that I have a family, but I'm going to die now anyway. And yeah, ultimately Cooper I think is the perfect example of what this world turns people into. Though he started out with good intentions, it ultimately led to his downfall and the end of who he was to his daughter. So to me, it's kind of something that makes sense to see him reduced to the ultimate sign of a loss of humanity in the wasteland, which is of course the feral glowing ghoul. Now, you can't have 2 bad endings back to back, so I do think that Lucy will have a happy one. I kind of think that her dad's going to be the beard and she's going to make the choice to step away from him. Again, the games are all about choice, and just having Lucy do this I think makes perfect sense with what we've seen so far. I think this will ultimately make Maximus fully cemented in the idea that she's the person to trust Cold Fusion with, as she'll do the good thing no matter what. So I do think that he'll hand it over and then she'll help to improve this trip. As for her brother, I like Norm, I do, but I wonder if he's going to be more in line with his father potentially. If Hank is defeated in the season, then we kind of need a bad guy connected to Lucy for season 3. So do you think Norm might be that? Now he's a nice guy, mate, I want to say that. I don't know how bad he is, but I think if we look at how things have been in the season, then he's done bad things. He of course killed Bud, which yeah, fair enough, but he also lied and conned these managers into following him and doing his bidding. Just like his dad would have. He didn't need the brain control device, he simply just lied, and it's led to lots and lots of issues. Anyway, that wraps up the episode, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the entry, and also what you think is gonna happen in the finale. This is the worst cosplay I've ever done, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think I should wear next week. Please drop a like on the video as well, and drop a comment with all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos every single week, and if you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month. Thank you to everyone who does it. Really appreciate it, and it just means we can buy amazing costumes and spend hours and hours in makeup like I have today to transform into a super mutant. Now, if you want something else to watch me, why not watch a video that we have on screen right now? If not though, what the hell is wrong with you? But thanks for watching this one. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace. Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049.
What's up, Snakes? New Vegas's ending has been canonized via the Fallout TV show, and while the showrunners wanted to keep a vague fog of war approach, which they discussed in numerous interviews, it seems that this was in vain. In this video, I will go over the evidence of this huge revelation, so with no hesitation, let's get into it. So first things first, the Mr. House we see on screen at the end of the episode is an AI, an uploaded and backed up version of Mr. House that is not biological, and not Mr. House controlling it from his control room via the computer. This is a pretty important distinction to make because this is different than how he appears in Fallout New Vegas. House makes a point of saying he wants to use the cold fusion to allow a backed up version of his consciousness control Vegas in a non-biological form. He says this in the scene when he's talking to Cooper Howard in one of the earlier episodes of Season 2, before the war. The version of the House we see in Episode 7, however, is that AI version, booted up by the Cold Fusion itself. What's interesting is the version of House we see here can appear with or without keeping House alive in the game. It kind of makes the actions you take around House specifically irrelevant. Note, before Cooper installs this, we see a no signal indication on the computer screen, which means House has been disabled. We know from previous episodes that the Securitrons have been updated and upgraded to the Mark II Securitrons, the military man faces rather than the police officer ones. And we see the police officer faces before war, so we know that this isn't some kind of incontinuity within the show, but in fact that the Securitrons have been upgraded. This means that Courier 6 got the Platinum chip for House, or Yes Man, and installed it at Fortification Hill, upgrading the Securitrons to the Mark II faces, in addition to upgrading the weapons to the Mark II weapons as well, which we can also see evidence of in the show. This means that the Courier either sided with Mr. House or Yes Man. Note, you can still upgrade the Securitrons and do other endings of the game, but it doesn't make a ton of sense because it would make your final battle more difficult, as you would now need to fight better Securitrons. So we're going to skip that as an option and just consider the fact that for completing the game, these guys need to be upgraded by either siding with Mr. House or Yes Man. But I am aware you can do it and the other factions. Another interesting thing to note here is there are also a few Securitrons off-strip in the show, and this is indicative that the army beneath the fort was upgraded and released into the wasteland to fight at the Battle of Hoover Dam, but also probably some remained in the Mojave for control, or just never made their way back to the Strip. But perhaps one of the more damning pieces of evidence that Yes Man is in fact the final ending of New Vegas was there is a disabled Securitron right next to Mr. House's computer in the scene where Cooper activates him. This is near exact to how Mr. House's office looks if you decide to install Yes Man. Yes Man will be installed from the Securitron that he resides in. Then once uploaded to Mr. House's computer, the Securitron will collapse and kind of flop to the side undamaged. We see that in this scene with Cooper, and it looks like that's this exact scenario. The Securitron next to House's computer is just there, undamaged and on the ground. No broken screen, no visible damage at all. It looks exactly like Yes Man was installed on this computer. We also don't really see evidence of other Securitrons in the room, or at least I didn't see any damaged, indicating a fight. Nothing like that. The others probably left for the Battle of Hoover Dam or just maintaining the Strip. This, coupled with the fact that House is not connected to the computer prior to Cooper activating the AI version of House, indicates that House is deceased and that Yes Man was installed in the game. This is the, quote, anarchist ending of Fallout New Vegas. No gods, no masters. Is an anarchist slogan, and it is probably the most chaotic ending of Fallout New Vegas that you could possibly do. And it's virtually canonized by the evidence presented earlier in this video. House being disconnected means that his physical body is likely deceased. Either the pod was opened and he was left alive to succumb to eventual infection, which is suggested in the game, or he was killed, possibly in-game by a 9-iron per the challenge. But there's some evidence beyond just what the show presents and what we know from the Fallout lore that indicates that this is in fact the canon ending, and I want to present that here as well. Also, though, real quick, statistically speaking, you probably don't subscribe,
All the soda you can
and
drink.
you should, so please do that. Alright, let's get back to it. So, the Yes Man ending being canonized makes a lot of sense for how the show is depicting the Vegas area, both Freeside, the Strip, and kind of the greater Vegas area as well. The Legion and NCR are largely in disarray and pushed back from their fronts that they had in Fallout New Vegas itself. Freeside stands, but it is in a state far different than what we see it in game, and that makes sense too. And the state of the greater wasteland around Vegas matches with the ending narration and some other evidence from Fallout New Vegas and developers. So for the purposes of this video, I'm assuming that the Securitrons are in fact upgraded based off the evidence I presented. So there is an ending sequence with upgraded Securitrons. And it reads, quote, "The courier with the aid of Yes Man drove both the Legion and NCR from Hoover Dam, securing New Vegas's independence from both factions. With Mr.
Hi,
House
how
out
are
of
you?
the picture, part of the Securitron army
I
was
just-
diverted.
I
to
just
the
want to
Strip
trade a few
be ordered.
things.
Go ahead.
Any chaos on the streets was ended quickly. Chaos became uncertainty, then acceptance, with minimal loss of life. New Vegas assumed its position as an independent power in the Mojave." End quote. While it is implied here that the Yes Man ending is pretty good for Vegas, it would leave a power vacuum, and I think some other evidence from developers points to the Yes Man ending actually not going so well for the Mojave. Without the forceful hand of Mr. House to run the Strip, it does seem pretty logical that it would completely fall into disarray eventually, especially without the protection of the NCR on the Strip itself. They kind of maintained order, more or less. So what's even more interesting here is this choice seems to align with one of the writer's original intent for the Yes Man ending, something that didn't fully make its way into the game, but he did discuss in a 2025 AMA on Reddit. And that writer, of course, is the writer of Yes Man himself, John Gonzalez, who basically said he would have preferred that the courier's power over the Strip slip. In the AMA, he says this, quote, "Okay, confession time. I actually think it was a mistake to let the courier win Vegas for him/herself through Yes Man, because it lets the player sidestep the thorny dilemma of choosing a highly imperfect faction to bring to power. I think it would have been better if using Yes Man to take power yourself would have led to a robot coup situation where it all slips out of your hands. Of course, I'm saying this based on somewhat dim memories of how all the options play out." End quote. Well, that's interesting. It does look like the courier eventually lost power in the wasteland, and what John is saying here kind of is what played out in the Fallout TV show, and I think that's pretty fascinating. Well, there you have it. Maybe the show aligns with at least one of the devs' original intentions for the Yes Man ending, more than what many on the internet are suggesting, even myself. This is pretty interesting to me. Now, I know many devs probably don't love the idea or the way the showrunners are showing the downfall of the Strip. I think Chris Avallone in particular
Lot
has
'em in
been
here
pretty
and
vocal
not
about
out
it.
there.
I don't know how much the rest can speak to their thoughts while also working for Microsoft. I don't think they're that limited, but you never know. But there is a theme throughout New Vegas that we are led to think that Vegas would not do well for long after the second battle of the Hoover Dam.
Yes?
No matter who you finish it for. I will say the cold fusion delivery is interesting. The choice is not implied or even suggested in Fallout New Vegas, obviously, so it's a completely new addition, and the whole AI house of it all is also equally interesting. What I'd be very curious to know is if the writers of the show knew they would be canonizing the games by how it was designed, leaving that intact Securitron, upgrading the faces of the Securitrons, and all the other evidence presented here. Whatever the case, if the writers knew about this AMA or not, or the implication of upgrading the Securitrons, remains to be seen. But it implies a canon ending for New Vegas, one way or the other. And I think it's yes, man. But I want to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments, because that is it for today's video. And I'm sure you guys have thoughts, so please let me know. Once again, don't forget to subscribe. I will catch you in the next video. Stay safe in the wasteland. Peace.
In the year 2077, a nuclear Armageddon obliterated the global population in an event known as the Great War. While the United States population was decimated, a shadowy organization of the nation's highest-ranking government officials had set in motion their plan to not only survive the apocalypse, but to thrive in its wake, using their combined resources to build hidden bases across the country that would allow them to carry out kidnappings, experiments, and a global genocide, all with the goal of achieving total domination and rebuilding America in their own image. This is the story of the Enclave. In the Fallout series, the Enclave is a secretive faction composed of the remnants of the United States government, believing that once they purged the world of all so-called mutants, that they would rebuild their once great nation under a new order, all with the goal of achieving total domination over the wasteland. But to fully grasp the history of the Enclave, you have to understand their origins. Before the war, the Enclave was involved in many of the deepest conspiracies of the federal government, consisting of the United States' most powerful and influential figures, such as the president, congressmen, acclaimed scientists, military officials, wealthy industrialists, and other prominent individuals, who all considered themselves to be the pinnacle of American intellect and power. With their combined resources, the Enclave funded extensive conspiracies aimed at ensuring their survival. In 2054, the Enclave would initiate an experiment known as Project Safehouse. In collaboration with Vault-Tec, the Enclave would commission the construction of 122 underground nuclear shelters known as vaults, which conducted a series of inhumane and unorthodox experiments on the United States population. Tim Kaine, creator of the Fallout series, has suggested that originally these vaults were commissioned to gather data for the Enclave to colonize another planet, although this remains unverified within the game's canon. As the resource wars escalated and nuclear tensions rose, Enclave members would begin to build secret nuclear shelters across the country, financed by embezzled government funds as well as corporate investors such as Poseidon Energy and Vault-Tec. These bases were constructed with the intention of sustaining Enclave operations, even if the United States were to fall. In 2073, the Enclave, in collaboration with Poseidon Oil, constructed the presidential oil rig off the coast of San Francisco in order to house the president, his cabinet, and other essential Enclave personnel. Furthermore, other facilities like the White Springs Congressional Bunker, Raven Rock, and the California Research Colony were built to safeguard the members of the Enclave and provide them with the resources necessary to further their goals in the post-apocalypse. As the Great War approached, their actions began to draw the attention of the public, nearly exposing the Enclave conspiracy before the impending Armageddon. One of the Enclave's earliest projects was the development of their now iconic plasma weapons, which began in 2063 with the creation of the MPLX Nova Surge prototype, the first instance of alien technology. Little did they know attract the attention of a group of alien conspiracy theorists known as Quaere Virum. Once the group got word of this technology's existence, the members of Quaere infiltrated an unclaimed facility that stole the STLX prototype. Their goal was clear, to expose the existence of extraterrestrials as well as the government's weaponization of alien technology. However, their plan met a swift end when Enclave operatives hunted down and eliminated the members of Quaere Virum before they could expose the conspiracy to the public. This was just one of the instances where the Enclave's secrecy was nearly compromised, as in June of 2077, the previously mentioned White Springs bunker in Appalachia was being funded with embezzled funds from the
Just
Department
chill
of
out,
Agriculture
asshole.
under Secretary Thomas Eckhart, a member of the Enclave. This caught the attention of Appalachia Senator Sam Blackwell, who had earned himself a reputation for being somewhat of a muckraker, routinely pointing out corruption within the United States government. It was around this time that he began investigating the series of unusual investments made by the Secretary of Agriculture. However, the truth led to threats being made against his daughter, which ultimately forced him to end the investigation and disappear into hiding. Months later, Blackwell would go on record in an interview with the Charleston Herald where he stated, quote, "There are sinister forces at work in the halls of government. I simply could not be a part of that anymore." This statement sparked rumors of a deep state conspiracy, but soon the public would discover the truth when, on October 18, 2077, the Boston Bugle would release an investigative report that raised the curtain on the existence of the Enclave. The article revealed that the president and his cabinet had not been to the White House in months. The initial assumption was that the president and his cabinet had moved operations to Raven Rock, but further investigations revealed that they had not been to Raven Rock in over a year. So, the question remained, where was the president? Through an extensive investigation, the Bugle revealed that the president had been running the country from a Poseidon Energy oil rig 175 miles off the coast of California. On top of all that, the anonymous sources that the Bugle had cited revealed that this rig had an official designation, Control Station Enclave. This revelation would prove the rumors that a deep state shadow government didn't use the rig and would take control of the United States in the event of a nuclear war. After this article was released, the public would eagerly await the president's response, who met these allegations with silence. Just 5 days later, on October 23, 2077, nuclear fire engulfed the country, and in the span of merely 2 hours, the Great War obliterated the United States. When the Great War came, all Enclave personnel retreated to their designated bases. While some managed to gain entry, others were not as fortunate, as only members of the Enclave were permitted inside their nuclear shelters. Government officials who attempted to enter without membership were killed on sight, and when the bombs finally dropped, the Enclave would activate all of their facilities with members inside. After years of meticulous plotting, they had survived Armageddon, and it is at this point in the timeline where the story of the Enclave truly begins. Authorized government officials would flee to the White Springs Congressional Bunker, which they had funded to ensure their safety. After the bunker was sealed and all non-members were executed, the Enclave could begin their mission in Appalachia, with the Secretary of the Treasury being the highest-ranking Enclave member to make it to the facility. The White Springs Congressional Bunker was originally intended to be the base of operations for the Enclave, with the facility being controlled by an AI supercomputer known as MODIS, while also having access to the Kovac Muldoon satellite system designed to monitor the region of Appalachia. However, when the bunker first activated, its personnel were horrified to discover that the bombs had severed their communications with the rest of the Enclave facilities, such as Raven Rock and the oil rig. With their communication systems down, they had no idea what had happened to the rest of the Enclave, or if anyone had even survived. Not only that, but the Secretary of the Treasury, who served as the de facto leader of the bunker, would almost immediately die from radiation poisoning under mysterious circumstances. Following the death of the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas Eckhart, was next in line for command of the White Springs bunker. This would lead to him being declared the new President of the United States, unaware that the real president had escaped to the Poseidon oil rig on the west coast. With no communication with the rest of the Enclave, there was no one opposed to him assuming the presidency. His goal as president was clear. Instead of seeking to restore government control as the Enclave initially planned, he aimed to eradicate communism by using the nuclear silos in the area to launch atomic missiles on China. When he proposed his ideas to the rest of the bunker, some were skeptical, as it seemed pointless to continue waging a war that had already concluded. This would lead Eckhart to seal those who did not agree with him into a room and had the bunker's AI, Modus, fill it with toxic gas, eliminating any opposition to his plan. As president, he had almost full control of the bunker, its personnel, as well as the Modus AI system. However, his staff was limited to 48 people after purging those who opposed his plans. This was a problem, as not only did he need more soldiers for his enclave to survive, but he also had only one general left under his command. General Harper was the only person authorized to activate DEFCON 1, which would launch the nuclear missiles. Therefore, Eckhart ensured that Harper would not be permitted to leave the bunker for his own safety. With the general put in charge of Eckhart's war plan, Enclave scouts were sent out into Appalachia to search for potential recruits. In June of 2079, Eckhart's men found a secret Chinese facility hidden underground which contained robotic drones known as Liberators, which he would have reprogrammed under Enclave control. They would also discover an abandoned rustic facility where they found the remains of experiments with the forced evolutionary virus, which Eckhart's men acquired for further research. This video is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensible vehicle combat game ever made, and is now available for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by using my link in the description of this video. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. Immerse yourself in the intense combat of War Thunder, where incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time. With an unmatched wealth of high-quality content to discover, there's simply no game better suited for fans of military history. And as a history major, I truly appreciate the authenticity and historical accuracy of the vehicles in the game. The developers' dedication to these details demonstrates their commitment to creating an immersive and realistic experience. War Thunder offers 3 distinct modes. Arcade suits those craving fast-paced matches with enhanced vehicle performance and simplified physics. Realistic mode, the perfect middle ground, strikes a balance between intensity and authenticity, while simulator mode ditches all guardrails for the ultimate challenge. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms. That includes 100,000 Silver Lions, multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive Vehicle Decorator, Eagle of Valor, and a premium account for the first 7 days of playing. This incredible offer is only available for a limited time, so be quick and join a worldwide community of over 70 million players in epic PvP battles today, and delve into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. This branch of the Enclave would continue to work alone until they were discovered by Colonel Ellen Santiago and her group of soldiers in late 2081. Who had traveled all the way from DC to Appalachia following rumors of the existence of the White Springs bunker. Eckhart was happy to have more soldiers at his disposal and accepted them into their ranks. However, over the next couple of years, Eckhart would begin to lose the confidence of his soldiers as he became increasingly erratic and reckless. In January 2082, after an Enclave scientist reported that a lab failure resulted in the escape of a scorched beast, Eckhart ordered the scientist to create more of the creatures, despite him being advised against it. In October of 2082, he had a heated dispute with Colonel Santiago after ordering her men to withdraw from the field while they were searching for a sergeant's wife. Their situation deteriorated further when General Harper would die of radiation poisoning, derailing Eckhart's plan for nuclear retaliation against China. He would salvage the situation in November when he would send Colonel Santiago to Camp McClintock,
where she was promoted to general by exploiting the location's automated promotion system.
Although successful, she felt it was dishonorable to manipulate a machine to obtain the rank of general. Despite her feelings, Eckhart now had a general under his command, granting him access to Appalachia's nuclear silos and delegating the task of obtaining nuclear launch codes to Santiago and her team. In March of 2083, Eckhart would discover that his longtime political rival who almost exposed the Enclave, Senator Sam Blackwell, was still alive and had killed one of his men. The senator was considered a threat to Enclave security due to the fact that he was in possession of a U.S. Senate ID, which granted him access to the White Springs bunker. Eckhart would issue a kill order against Blackwell and send Enclave agent Gray into Appalachia to track him down. Gray would corner Blackwell inside of his personal bunker and succeed in putting him down. Months would pass, and in June, Eckhart's plan was nearing completion, but there was a problem. Appalachia's nuclear silos were automated and required a high enough threat level in order to activate DEFCON 1 and launch the atomic bomb. To fix this problem, Eckhart would order General Santiago to release the Liberator robots, Super Mutants, and Scorch Beasts onto Appalachia in order to convince the system that the United States was being invaded. Santiago would refuse this order, believing that this plan was going too far, prompting Eckhart to inject her with the serum which placed her in a medically induced coma so that she couldn't thwart his plan. With no one left to stand in his way, Eckhart unleashed the Scorch Beasts, Super Mutants, and Liberators onto Appalachia, which would slowly begin to increase the nuclear system's perceived threat level towards DEFCON 1. However, his plans would ultimately be foiled when in February of 2085, a group of Enclave soldiers betrayed Eckhart, freeing Santiago from captivity and successfully reviving her. This would lead to the Appalachian Enclave being split into two groups, Eckhart's loyalists and Santiago's rebels. The two factions would open fire on each other throughout the bunker, and eventually Santiago would order her soldiers to destroy the Modus AI with explosive charges, as it was still under the control of Eckhart. When the explosives were triggered, it destroyed a large portion of Modus's memory, causing it to go haywire and filling the bunker with a deadly toxin that suffocated everyone inside, including Eckhart, putting an end to the Appalachian Enclave. After the bunker's personnel had perished, Modus dedicated itself to restoring the facility back to full functionality, awaiting the day that someone would arrive to help re-establish the Enclave in Appalachia. While the Appalachian Enclave met a grueling demise only 8 years after the Great War, over 2,800 miles west, the rest of the Enclave thrived on the presidential oil rig in the Pacific. For over 60 years after the Great War, the Enclave maintained their own version of the United States government. This West Coast branch of the Enclave believed that they were the last bastion of humanity left on Earth. And if you were not born into the Enclave, you were either killed, experimented on, or used for slave labor, with their ultimate goal being to wipe out any and all non-Enclave survivors in the wasteland, because to them, if you weren't with them, then you were nothing more than a mutant. The Enclave maintained a strict hierarchy, consisting of the executive branch,
which included a president and vice president.
The president in particular had unlimited power due to the Enclave neglecting to create a judicial branch. There was, however, a legislative branch, which included a number of congressmen and women who presumably are responsible for the creation of laws and policies that govern the Enclave. The Enclave's military structure was reformed from the remnants of the old United States military, consolidating all branches under the Department of the Army, most likely due to the other branches diminishing in size after the Great War. Their military included a general, as well as joint chiefs of staff who make up the Army High Command. The Army made up the bulk of the Enclaved armed forces, and its soldiers were equipped with a variety of assault, laser, and plasma weapons, and were equipped with advanced combat armor as well as advanced power armor. Then, there was the Enclave Air Force, which utilized XVB-02 vertibirds, able to transport Enclave infantry into battle, while also providing aerial support if needed. The Enclave Navy was a small branch, which comprised of a few pre-war battleships stationed at the oil rig. The Secret Service would be tasked with protecting the president just as they did in the pre-war United States. They would also be deployed on delicate missions in the wasteland, which usually involved the assassination of anyone who stood in the way of Enclave operations. Aside from the military, executive, and judicial branches, there was also an array of different divisions within the Enclave, such as the R&D Department, the Chemical Corps, the Atomic Energy Commission, and funnily enough, a Peacekeeping and Reconnaissance Department. The Enclave would consolidate all gathered information through a system called EnclaveNet, which was their primary system for communication and information storage. With all these preparations in place, when the Great War ended, the Enclave ran like clockwork. About a century later, a new president known only as Richardson Sr. was voted in to be the President of the United States. During his presidency, he mandated an increase in the development of Enclave technology, which included the Mark I advanced power armor, which evolved from the pre-war X-01 design. As the Enclave advanced in technology, President Richardson would train his son, Dick Richardson, in the art of persuasion, which would eventually get Dick elected to Congress around 2215, and 5 years later, with the help of Richardson Sr.'s political influence, Dick would be elected president, taking over his father's role in 2220. As president, he would continue the Enclave's plans to exterminate the population of the wasteland and establish their version of the United States, with many of his policies being simply extensions of his father's. By the year 2235, the Enclave would begin experimenting on captive Deathclaws with the goal of creating expendable shock troops for their operations. In the following year, the Enclave would make a discovery which would set in motion their plans for world domination when they discovered the ruins of the Mariposa military base on July 20th, 2236. According to their records, this was the site where the United States government had begun to experiment with FEV in order to create super soldiers for the United States Army. However, the base was in ruins, as it had previously been set to self-destruct by a certain individual from Vault 13 years before. After making this discovery, the Enclave would send their Chemical Corps to scour the base, while assault squads were sent into the wasteland to gather slaves to use for excavation. One of these slaves was a man named Melchior, who was captured from the town of Reading. Keep him in mind, because he'll become important later. As the excavations went on, the slaves would slowly begin to feel the effects of the FEV chemicals in the base, as they began to change into super mutants the longer they stayed in Mariposa. Among those affected by the FEV was an Enclave soldier named Frank Horrigan. Frank was described as a huge brick of a man, and previously served as the president's bodyguard until an undocumented psychotic blunder would see him reassigned to Mariposa. During his time there, he would begin to feel the effects of the FEV as he was turning into a super mutant. But instead of being executed, he was sent back to the Enclave oil rig to be experimented on. Meanwhile, Melchior, aware that he and the other slaves would be executed once the excavation was completed, began stashing weapons with his comrades in order to have a chance at freedom once the Enclave had no further use for them. Ultimately, in 2237, the Enclave was able to extract a pure sample of FEV from the ruins of Mariposa, and thus had no more need for the slaves. But when they went to execute them, the slaves rebelled, killing a good number of Enclave personnel in the process. The soldiers retreated from the base, sustaining heavy casualties, but before fleeing, they utilized explosives to seal the entrance of Mariposa, trapping the mutants inside. With a pure sample of FEV in their possession, the Enclave utilized it to conduct a series of sinister experiments. The captured Deathclaws would be among the first subjects exposed to the FEV by the Enclave, granting them advanced intelligence as well as the ability to talk with varying degrees of articulation. Another subject of the FEV was Frank Horrigan, who would be forced to undergo relentless experiments by Enclave scientists, furthering his transformation into a super mutant. Under the supervision of Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling, Horrigan would be used as a guinea pig for experiments involving modified strands of FEV, with somewhat successful results. Frank would endure this suffering for over 2 years, and during that time he was kept heavily sedated, only allowed brief periods of consciousness during which several violent incidents occurred. Frank would become a, quote, genetically engineered freak, and would be seen as such by even his own comrades, as his DNA had undergone such drastic changes that he had become a unique mutant, only being kept alive by machines. And when the tests ran dry in January of 2239, the Enclave decided that he was too much of an asset to be discarded. As a result, Frank was brainwashed, outfitted with a custom suit of power armor tailored to his immense size, and deployed back into the field as a member of the Secret Service, becoming the boogeyman of the Wasteland. While the Enclave succeeded in creating incredibly powerful soldiers out of Frank Horrigan and the Intelligent Death Claws, their ultimate goal when they excavated Mariposa was to use the FEV to create a biological virus capable of exterminating billions worldwide, with the Enclave's ultimate goal, as previously mentioned, being to exterminate all of mankind apart from themselves. The virus would begin development under Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling, who would send out Enclave soldiers to collect various chemicals required for the development of the virus. In early 2241, the Enclave would make contact with the Salvatore crime family in New Reno, and offered them laser weapons in exchange for chemicals crucial to the development of the virus. While the Enclave usually only operated behind the scenes, they pursued this course of action because, ultimately, it wouldn't matter, because the Salvatores as well as the rest of the population would be dead after their bioweapon was created and released. Later that year, the virus, now known by the designation FEV Curling 13, would be near completion, with Dr. Curling needing to conduct one final experiment before releasing it onto the population. This experiment involved conducting evaluations on 2 test groups, one free of radiation and the other exposed to it. In order to acquire these subjects, the Enclave would first send an all-clear signal to Vault 13, and on May 16, 2242, the vault was opened, and 2 Enclave assault squads immediately opened fire, killing 3 dwellers on the spot before storming the vault. The surviving residents were rounded up and taken back to the oil rig. Following this, the previously mentioned Intelligent Death Claws would trick their Enclave masters into believing that they were a failed experiment, discarding them inside the now abandoned Vault 13. 2 months later, another Enclave assault squad was dispatched to the village of Arroyo in the California mountains, where they captured the tribals and transported them to the oil rig. With the 2 test groups captured, the Enclave would subject the Vault dwellers, as well as the Arroyo tribals, to FEV Curling 13. While this was all happening, the Intelligent Death Claws had made Vault 13 their new home, and this would prompt the Enclave to dispatch Frank Horrigan and a squad of soldiers to exterminate them once and for all. Back at the oil rig, the initial tests for FEV Curling 13 showed an estimated 99.5% fatality rate. The villagers from Arroyo died within an hour of exposure, while the subjects from Vault 13 perished on average 14.5 hours after exposure. With promising results, the Enclave projected that they could produce 250,000 gallons within 6 weeks' time, releasing the FEV Curling 13 into the atmosphere through jet streams and creating a vaccine to immunize themselves from the virus's effects. Everything was going according to plan until the oil rig was infiltrated by the Chosen One, who had come to free his people. During his infiltration, the Chosen One managed to assassinate President Dick Richardson, as well as causing a meltdown in the oil rig's reactor. But before he could make his escape, the Chosen One came face to face with Frank Horrigan.
You've gotten a lot farther than you should have. But then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Muty. Time to die.
By some miracle, the Chosen One managed to defeat Horrigan before leaving the oil rig with the Vault 13 residents and the villagers of Arroyo. As the Chosen One set sail back to the mainland, the meltdown in the oil rig's reactor caused a massive explosion, destroying the Enclave's headquarters and killing everyone inside. The loss of their headquarters dealt a devastating blow to the Enclave, and this catalyst event plunged them into a downward spiral, marking the beginning of the end for the Enclave. After the oil rig was obliterated, those who were not stationed there when it was destroyed fled to Camp Navarro in New California, where the remaining members of the Enclave sought refuge. The Enclave would manage to keep Navarro operational until 2242, when their senior scientist, a man named Autumn, received a signal from someone named John Henry Eden. Claiming to be the new president of the United States, Eden ordered all remaining Enclave members to assemble at Raven Rock in Washington, D.C. Few soldiers opted to hold position at Camp Navarro, and the ones that did were dealt with by the NCR during the sacking of Navarro. Meanwhile, in the east, the rest of the Enclave personnel would arrive at Raven Rock. Upon his arrival, Autumn was summoned for a meeting with John Henry Eden, and to his surprise, he discovered that the president was actually a Zax AI supercomputer programmed to govern the United States in the event of a national catastrophe. Eden was loaded with data about American history, and his personality was based on an amalgamation of every single president in the nation's history. Autumn kept Eden's true identity a secret from the rest of the Enclave, but passed on the knowledge to his son, Augustus Autumn, before passing away. Augustus would later rise to the rank of colonel and lead the Enclave's military. Over the years, the Enclave would re-establish itself at Raven Rock and the Adams Air Force Base, utilizing their resources such as manufacturing facilities, weapons stockpiles, and a massive mobile-based crawler. With these resources at their disposal, they developed new and advanced technologies, such as the Black Devil and Hellfire power armor, originally prototypes from before the destruction of the oil rig, now fully manufactured for the Enclave soldiers to use. Additionally, the Enclave began a project at the Adams Air Force Base to create an enhanced line of Duraframe iBots. Although this project was ultimately abandoned, with only one unit named Eddie avoiding being scrapped. This new East Coast Enclave under Colonel Autumn had abandoned their previous plans for genocide and instead focused on consolidating their power in order to become the dominant governing authority in the Wasteland. While this Enclave initially operated in the shadows, they would eventually deploy their iBots to spread propaganda across the Wasteland, portraying themselves as saviors rebuilding America. Meanwhile, a power struggle was brewing behind the scenes between Colonel Autumn and President Eden. You see, Colonel Autumn wanted to establish the Enclave as a governing body over the people of the Wasteland, while Eden wanted to pursue the Enclave's original goal of genociding all mutants, just as they did back in Fallout 2. Autumn believed this plan was too extreme, and for a time, he convinced the president against carrying out a genocide. However, Eden would secretly bide his time, waiting for the right moment to betray Autumn and cull the herd. While the Enclave had attempted to rally the support of the people, they would ultimately fail, as the Brotherhood of Steel was proving to be the more preferable faction for the public, as they were actually helping the people of the Wasteland. Around the late 2250s, the Brotherhood of Steel, under Elder Owen Lyons, would take on Project Purity. The project, created by a man named James and a group of scientists, would attempt to build a large-scale water purifier inside the Jefferson Memorial, capable of providing clean water to the citizens of the Wasteland. Eventually, though, by the year 2277, the project had been abandoned. However, during that same year, James's son, the Lone Wanderer, cleared the Jefferson Memorial of supermutants, rescued his father from Vault 112, and helped persuade the project's scientists to continue to work on it. This caught the attention of Colonel Autumn, who dispatched Enclave soldiers to take over the Jefferson Memorial by force. Autumn's plan was to activate the purifier while it was under their control, in order to deceive the people of the Wasteland into believing that the Enclave was responsible for Project Purity, granting them support and authority. Colonel Autumn would confront James and the other scientists working on Project Purity inside the activation chamber, and threatened to kill them all if they didn't activate the facility. James appeared as though he was going to comply with Autumn's demands, but instead, he triggered a disruption inside the chamber, which caused a massive radiation leak, killing almost everyone inside. While James would perish inside the chamber, Autumn managed to inject himself with a powerful anti-radiation agent and was able to just barely survive the attempt on his life. When he regained consciousness, Autumn would continue his plan to control the Wastelands. And while his scientists worked on activating the purifier, he appeared on Enclave radio, warning the people not to interfere with Enclave troops, threatening severe punishment for those who did. In addition, enforcement points were set up across the capital Wasteland to monitor traffic, conduct genetic screenings, and detain non-compliant individuals. Meanwhile, Enclave troops were sent to locations with large amounts of radiation in order to acquire samples and analyze local mutated wildlife. Enclave troops were also sent to Old Alney in order to capture Deathclaws to use as shock troops for their military. On top of all of that, Autumn would prioritize tracking James's son, the Lone Wanderer, who he believed knew the code to activate the purifier. The Enclave would track the Lone Wanderer to Vault 87, which contained a Garden of Eden creation kit, which was necessary to activate Project Purity. Enclave troops led by Colonel Autumn then infiltrated Vault 87, securing the Gek and capturing the Lone Wanderer. After being transported to Raven Rock for questioning, the Lone Wanderer was imprisoned and personally interrogated by Autumn, who demanded the code to activate the purifier. It was during this interrogation that Colonel Autumn was ordered by President Eden to handle other matters, and once Autumn left the cell, Eden would free the Lone Wanderer from captivity and summoned him to his office. After the Lone Wanderer escaped and Autumn discovered what Eden had done, he ordered his men to shoot on sight and disregard the president's orders. While the president was higher in the chain of command than the colonel, the soldiers were more loyal to Autumn and attempted to eliminate the Lone Wanderer before he could make it to Eden. After fighting through waves of Enclave troops, the Lone Wanderer would make it to the presidential office and discover Eden's true identity as a supercomputer. Eden would then make a proposition to the Lone Wanderer, and that was to infect Project Purity with a modified strand of FEV which would infect all mutated life in the Capital Wasteland, just as the Enclave of old had planned to do all those years ago. While the player has the choice to take Eden's deal, in canon, the Lone Wanderer would decline his offer and escape the facility. And during the escape, Raven Rock, along with President Eden, would be destroyed, as the Lone Wanderer has the option to either convince Eden that his plan is fucking stupid and that he needs to activate the facility's self-destruct sequence, or steal the code from Colonel Autumn's quarters and trigger the explosion themselves. If neither happens, Liberty Prime eventually arrives at Raven Rock and destroys it after the main quest. During the Lone Wanderer's escape, Colonel Autumn would relocate to the Jefferson Memorial. However, before he could succeed in activating the Purifier, the Brotherhood of Steel would deploy Liberty Prime and launch an attack on the Jefferson Memorial in an attempt to seize Project Purity from the Enclave's control. Autumn underestimated the strength of the Brotherhood, and during the battle for Project Purity, the Enclave was overwhelmed as the Jefferson Memorial was seized by Lion's Pride with the help of Liberty Prime. Once inside, the Lone Wanderer would confront Colonel Autumn, and during this confrontation, Autumn is either killed in battle or persuaded to retreat by the player character. Regardless of Autumn's fate, the Purifier would be activated, securing the Brotherhood's victory and providing clean water to the people of the Capital Wasteland. 2 weeks later, the Brotherhood of Steel would launch a final attack on the Enclave, attempting to wipe them out once and for all. During this attack, the Brotherhood would redeploy Liberty Prime to finish them off, but they were led into a trap, as the Enclave would bombard Liberty Prime with an orbital strike, destroying him in the process. While this slowed down the Brotherhood, it ultimately proved futile, as the Lone Wanderer infiltrated the Enclave's mobile base crawler, sabotaging their orbital strikes, and redirecting the payload to devastate the Adams Air Force Base, wiping out all remaining Enclave forces and ending the war for the Capital Wasteland. The year is now 2281, and the Enclave's presence is now almost non-existent. Their bases in the Capital Wasteland were destroyed, Camp Navarro was seized by the NCR, and its surviving members were either in hiding or were being tried for war crimes. One squad managed to escape Camp Navarro before it was taken by the NCR, and fled to a vertibird refueling station near Mount Charleston. There, they retired their armor, set the station to standby, and dispersed to integrate into the population of the Mojave Wasteland. Depending on your choices in Fallout New Vegas, the remnants may reunite to fight during the Battle of Hoover Dam, or they'll meet their ends at the hands of the Courier. Meanwhile, in the Mojave Express building, there lies an Eyebot, designated ED-E. Eddie was the last surviving model of Duraframe Eyebots created at the Adams Air Force Base in the Capital Wasteland. Before the base was destroyed by the Brotherhood of Steel, Eddie's creator, Dr. Whitley, uploaded valuable Enclave data into the Eyebots database. He then sent Eddie on a cross-country journey to Camp Navarro, unaware that it had been lost to the NCR decades earlier. As his journey continued, eventually, Eddie reached the Mojave Wasteland, where he was shot twice by a raider with a sniper rifle. The damage caused him to deactivate near the town of Prim. Eventually, Eddie was found by a courier, who ended up leaving him at the Mojave Express building, where he lay, awaiting someone to come along and repair him. By the year 2287, on Mount Desert Island, Maine, a lone Enclave survivor named Brian Richter lives among the ranks of the Children of Adam. Richter, who once fought under Colonel Autumn and President Eden, was on a long-term mission to recover a reserve of fusion cores back in 2277. when disaster struck. You see, the disposal facility they had tracked the cores to was still operational, and due to a mistake made by the team's engineer, the containment cellar's lead-wrapped steel door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Surviving on 2 sips of water and a bit of rad roach a day, Richter slowly watched his team die of starvation or dehydration. As he anticipated his demise, Richter was saved by a member of the Children of Adam named Zealot Tectus, who was able to break the seal on the door. After being nursed back to health by the Archimist, Richter attributed his survival to Adam's blessing and became a Grand Zealot of the Children of Adam. Meanwhile, in the former state of Massachusetts, remnants of the Enclave began to appear, setting up outposts around the Commonwealth. Led by Major Elias, their orders were to establish a field headquarters in the Glowing Sea, with their primary goal being the recovery of high-value Enclave technology, including the Hellfire power armor, Exo-2 power armor, and a Tesla cannon. Satellite encampments were established across the state of Massachusetts, as these Enclave soldiers believed that the Commonwealth had potential for a new base of operations. During these operations, the Enclave would gather intelligence via reconnaissance, coercion, torture, and any other methods they deemed necessary, viewing the general population as expendable, with standing orders to hunt down any witnesses. Other camps were also established for various specialized purposes, such as deploying iBots, collecting DNA samples, and conducting research on local flora. These Enclave remnants are part of the Creation Club quest, Echoes of the Past, so if you haven't played Fallout 4 in a while, this quest may be unfamiliar to you. However, with the latest next-gen update for Fallout 4, you can access this quest for free via the Creation Club. Despite constant setbacks and gradually fading into myth, the Enclave survived in isolated locations. And in Amazon's Fallout TV show, we are shown the Enclave research colony. To the naked eye, the colony appears to be a simple warehouse complex, but in reality, it is home to an underground subterranean facility controlled by the Enclave. By the year 2296, the Enclave used this facility primarily for experiments involving mutated biology, energy studies, and significantly, behavioral engineering, which utilized dogs bred solely for the purpose of their research. One of the Enclave scientists, a man named Wilzig, would grow attached to one of the dogs named CX-404 and secretly adopted her. It was around this time that Wilzig was contacted by Lee Moldaver, who wanted to use cold fusion to power the city of Los Angeles. If Wilzig could steal the cold fusion from the Enclave and escape their facility, Lee promised him safe passage to Los Angeles. After conducting a series of off-the-books experiments with the cold fusion, Wilzig injected it into his neck in order to keep it safe. However, his plan was foiled when another scientist discovered that Wilzig had been experimenting with cold fusion, as well as hiding a dog in his quarters. While Wilzig pleaded with his colleague, he would set off the facility's alarm and shoved Wilzig to the ground. CX-404 then came to the defense of her master and killed the scientist right then and there. Knowing that he would be executed for his defiance, Wilzig took CX-404 and fled the facility in a daring escape. Eventually, a reward was put out on anyone who could capture or kill Wilzig, prompting every bounty hunter in the area to go after him. Moldaver would arrange for Wilzig to be safely transported from Philly to the Griffith Observatory so he could activate the cold fusion. However, before he could, he had his leg shot off by the ghoul in a town shootout. With the help of a vault dweller named Lucy, he managed to escape the town before he could be captured. Knowing that his injury was hindering the delivery of the cold fusion, Wilzig chose to take a cyanide pill, ending his own life. Before passing away, Wilzig instructed Lucy to retrieve the cold fusion inside of his neck by decapitating him and delivering his head to Moldaver. This decision would allow Lucy to deliver the cold fusion without him holding her back. After he ultimately died, Lucy followed his instructions, decapitated him, and headed off into the wasteland. See what I did there? Once again, I'd like to thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play it for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox now by using my link in the description of this video. And don't forget, new and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles, 100,000 Silver Lions, and other goodies, all available for a limited time only, so make sure not to miss it.